Good morning, everyone. This is Mondo. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're ready for the week. I am. I'm very ready for the week, and I'm glad that we're going to have one. This morning, I'm going to talk a little bit about a few different subjects very quickly. First of all, we see that the nightmare of capitalism continues. A lot of people don't understand what capitalism really is. I've defined it here several times, and no one seems to know the definition. Let's face it, people are trapped in their everyday realities, which means survival, working, making money to pay the bills, entertaining themselves if they have enough disposable income to do that, or doing it without needing to spend any money. And they take their mind off of what really, unless you're old and away from the age of it, reproduction. A lot of people, men and women, are focused on the drive to reproduce, and they don't know it. That's a real problem, isn't it? A very big problem, my friends. I've played parts of this album before. This is Drudk, a furrow cut short. So, most of us are caught up in the drive to reproduce. I've explained where my life was at for a number of years. Since I no longer have that drive, nor want to reproduce, never really did, except at very brief moments. Glad that I didn't, and now the product of that is gone. However, he reproduced, so my genes are alive in a couple of different individuals. This is the real deal. That's the real deal is reproducing. And people don't realize what their inner drives are. That's right, folks. Your drive, your sexual drive is about reproduction. Whether you're gay, whether you're straight, whether you're bi, whether you're trans, whatever it is, that's still your drive as a biological being. That's your species drive. Everyone can't get away from it. And that is a success. Intelligence is not a measure of evolutionary success unless it involves a strategy to reproduce. So, this is the preoccupation that most of us have. Most of us have a preoccupation with the drive to reproduce. Now, those who are of the intellect variety, especially the nihilists, will argue this point. Go ahead and argue it all you want. You're not going to stop what that inexorable drive is. Oh, yes, you're going to have sex, you're going to read books, you're going to do all these things that are a lot of fun, and I do as well. However, you're not going to escape from the biological evolutionary facts. Okay? Next piece. Next piece here has to do, again, with 12-step programs. I'm noticing that there's a lot of prattle on the internet about the uselessness, well, the lack of usefulness versus what works and what is efficacious. The 12-step programs maintain, if you follow their program explicitly, that you will succeed. You'll get clean, stay clean, sober, whatever. Sober is, I never liked the term. It's kind of a stupid, old, berating, erroneous retort. That's right. Short of being entirely recovering. Never liked it. Never been really sober. I've been rational. I've had rational moments. Clean is better. However, most of us are not going to get clean and stay clean every day. A lot of us are going to be clean regularly. A lot of us are going to practice some form of moderation. A lot of us are going to not bother with any of that and just do what we want to do. That's what most people are going to do. Now, people in these programs, they have a great fear that they have this progressive, incurable, and fatal disease, and that the ends of living in that disease are jails, institutions, and death. Very simply not true. I think those slogans can be self-fulfilling prophecies if we believe them. I think it's very important not to allow ourselves to believe in those philosophies. There's a couple of guys out there who are reviewing the steps and the folly of that. Now, I actually rewrote them from an atheistic point of view at one point and from a satanic point of view at another point. And I just don't think they have any usefulness in either vein. I really don't. I don't think they're useful either way. I think they're, while some people have found efficacy in them, it's contrived, just like everything else. Fine, you can do that. I'm not going to fight with you over your own path. That's your path. That's what you're choosing to do. I'm not going to fight with you over it. I'm going to tell you from my experience that they're a great distraction from this obsession and compulsion and the beliefs in those two terms. The steps are a great distraction from that. As a believer, they didn't work any better than they did as a non-believer. And people say that's because you weren't really a believer. Well, I don't want to be in a religious program, secular or otherwise. And that's all that shit is a secular religious program. I've already debunked the steps, and once you debunk the first step, there's no point in pursuing the other 11. The 12th step has merit because it is about the common good. And it is about carrying the message that you don't have to be overcome by addictions or addiction. It's a great message that you can share what you've done to overcome yours, whether you're pursuing a path of moderation, abstinence, or you're going to use regularly, like Carl Hart does in his newest book, which I like very, very much. In that book, he gives you a program, a regimen for using successfully, and he does, even heroin. Well, I'm not interested in using heroin because I don't like what opiates do to me. I don't like the side effects. I don't like the itch, and I don't like to nod out, and I just don't like side effects of opiates. So, and once again, it's almost like eating. Everyone has their tastes, or listening to music. Everyone has their taste. When it comes to drugs, for me, it's medicinal primarily. Even alcohol. I use alcohol as a sedative, not to the point of getting stumbling drunk for sure. I do use it as a sedative, and it does work very well, especially in conjunction with cannabis. And those of you that have done your homework know that they used to be combined in some of these tonics that used to be out there back around the turn of the 19th to the 20th century. This is not a pro-drug monologue. It's not an anti-drug monologue. However, it is a highly critical monologue of the 12-step programs because what they do is they foster cultism and they foster an abeyance to things that are, well, not very helpful. Let's put it that way. An abeyance to things that are fanatical and religious in nature. And you can apologize for that and delineate it and water it down however you want. It remains the same. And I don't really see that here in this country and in this local area. Well, of course, the pandemic's had a lot to do with that these things are growing. They're not growing. And yes, while we've had a lot of social and financial anxiety and stress in general in the society, we've had more and more people using drugs to excess. And when I say drugs, I also mean alcohol, because alcohol, there was a truism that came out of 12-step program. Alcohol is a drug. And that when we're looking at drugs in a general way, we treat them all the same. However, something that used to be pointed out in the old, what they used to call the white book in Narcotics Anonymous, is that it has a peculiar addiction pattern all its own. Just like most drugs. Most drugs have a peculiar addiction pattern, and a lot of that is individual to who the user is. We have a lot of rhetoric about all of this, and a lot of people have come out and are saying, hey, 12 steps no more. Don't need it. Don't need that program. Don't need fanaticism. Don't need occultism. So another successful part of it that I've spoken of before has to do with peer support. Peer support is very important, and that's been shown a number of times. I mean, Mata's work and Hari's work and Stanton Peele and his colleague over at LifeRing, or whatever it's called. I don't think it's LifeRing. Those guys have all pushed the importance of peer support. Peer support is very important. There's no question about it. And it's very important to develop that support when you're thinking about changing your addiction pattern. And I do not think it's a bad idea to get completely abstinent for a while. However, the best strategy will be for you as an individual to get there. Now, that may be in moderating, cutting down until finally no more. Now, a lot of people do that with drinking. A lot of people do that with using various other substances, including opiates, and there's substitutions like Suboxone and Methadone. They do a stair-step approach to reducing their dosage, and they come down the ladder. I think those are good approaches. Other folks like myself go cold turkey on certain things. Nothing wrong with that either. If you can bear the pain of kicking, of withdrawals, then you can use that approach. And it can be very effective because you can develop some very powerful aversions to not getting strung out. Now, that's chiefly true with drugs that have a highly addictive physical nature, or at least the ones that we believe do. Now, I've seen guys that don't believe they can get addicted to opiates, and they don't, because they don't use it over and over again, which creates a dependence. Some of the authorities now, some of the experts are saying there is no such thing as dependence. Interesting. I don't practice neurosciences, especially in the field of addiction biochemistry and biology and neurophysiology. So I'm not able to give you an expert opinion. There are some out there. I do know this. If you want to stop, you can stop. I've seen many people who were what you would call chronically addicted. Yeah, that's right. That's kind of a funny term. I've seen them stop, and you can stop. Anyone can stop. The things that seem to be very important are making a decision to change the pattern. That's number one. Developing a strategy to pursue that decision. That's important if you're going to do it. Now, I had a decision in mind for many years before I got a strategy. My strategy was canned. That strategy was abstinence through 12-step program. And it worked. And that's where a 12-step program can be very effective. The meetings can be very effective at gaining peer support. The rest of the suggestions can be tossed to the wayside. You don't really have to get a sponsor because that's somebody that's going to indoctrinate you in their way of working the steps in most cases. You don't have to work the steps with a sponsor. You don't have to work the steps. You can go to meetings to feel the support of people who are not using anymore, who have found a better way of life. However, if you want to practice moderation, you are not going to get support for that. You're going to need to find something else. You're going to need to find a group of individuals who practice moderation. Now, that's what I have. I have an extended group of individuals who practice moderation, and it works for all of us. And we're alive, we're functioning, we're doing well. We're not going down the tubes. Our lives are not unmanageable, out of control. We're doing well. However, if abstinence is something that you do, and I think it can be a very crucial step for a lot of people overcoming their addiction. Where abstinence, I think, works very well as a confidence builder in knowing that you don't have to use, that you can stop using, and that you can go without using to have a productive life, to fully participate in your life. And then if you want to practice moderation, there's strategies for that. For instance, picking the right substances, 1. 2, picking a pattern to use those substances and sticking with that pattern. And that's where the work of people like Carl Hart could come in, because he's done that, and he has a very effective strategy. I have an effective strategy as well. I develop an aversion for getting too intoxicated. Once I get to the point of medicated state that I want, I stop. Usually this is about getting enough sleep. And I hope that everybody gets enough sleep, because sleep is very healing. If we can sleep 7 to 9 hours a day, every day, here we go with Mondo's nutritional plan, right? Sleep 7 to 9 hours a day, drink a lot of water, usually about a gallon of water a day. Eat food that's not loaded with toxicity, meaning too much sodium, too many preservatives, overloading with the wrong kind of nutrients. And you can pick that out. And I think everybody kind of has an individual spectrum of those. And I think we have to pick those out for ourselves. You know, it takes some work to develop a program of self-care. And that means mental and emotional also. What are we thinking? Are we thinking the types of things that are going to benefit our physical state and emotional state? A lot of times thinking comes from beliefs, and the beliefs and thinking dictate the emotions. And that's what we have to be very careful with, and we have to be on point. I hope you're doing that. When we get to these points, then we develop this program, either moderation or abstinence. Abstinence is easy. You just don't take anything that's mind-altering. That means you really don't want to overdo caffeine and nicotine especially. I think it's a good idea for most people to be completely abstinent from nicotine-bearing substances and tobacco, even though there are those who can use it moderately. I had a grandfather who smoked a tin of Prince Albert tobacco every day, lived till he was 95. Probably died because he had nothing to do and felt like he was being put out to rest, and so he went to rest. We can order our lives. We can manage our lives. Even in those programs, you find that's a good peer support. People are there who have managed their lives. There are actually people in those rooms who are using moderately. They are taking drugs moderately. Now, look at the amount of people who are getting medicated for their mental health issues. A lot. And these medications, they make some people normal and dumb the fuck out of others. And I shouldn't say I'm against them. I'm not against them. I'm just highly skeptical of the way they're prescribed according to the individual's needs. I don't think there's enough of a physiological chemical profile of that person to actually adequately address pharmaceutically those needs. I mean, a lot of it can be wrapped up in diet and exercise and sleep and meditation. These are all individual situations that, if you care enough about yourself, when I cared enough about myself, I did a lot to that effect, and it helped. And that's probably why I'm still alive. I was exposed to a lot of different toxic environments, meaning actual chemical radioactive toxicities, and I've survived, and I don't have cancer, and I don't have the predispositions for it. I don't have those markers. I do have COPD, and that came from a variety of things. Smoking cigarettes for 30 years. Smoking too much high concentrates of cannabis as a younger person for a number of years. Never got into smoking crack, thank goodness. Didn't like it. Or speed. Didn't like to smoke any of that. Not good for the lungs and the throat and the nasal and pharyngeal mucosa. Not good for that. So I tend to avoid things that place a harsh stress and distress on my systems. And that's what I recommend, from my own experience. Don't stress the system. De-stress. If we work properly in our lives, practice the proper routines, we will have much less stress. And there are ways to deal with stress we have experienced. We can relieve those stressors and the stress. There's many, many ways to do this. I'm not here to sell you my way. I'm not here to sell you anything. So much of our society now is just consumer-based. I got to sell you something so I don't have to work. And you wind up doing twice as much work trying to sell somebody something they don't want. When actually, on these bases, it's all about what attracts people. And you don't have to sell it to them. They can get all of this just for the price of their own efforts. We can get all of this by the price of our own efforts, just like I have. I mean, I paid for years of therapy, and it was helpful to some extent. Self-development programs were very helpful. And these all make up the multifaceted diamond of an individual. Like you, like me, like a lot of people we care for. And I care for you folks, a lot of you. Hopefully you're listening. On the other podcast, we just did one on grief. I think, in my experience, it's very important to learn how to grieve and to realize that it's an ongoing emotional process. And I hope all of us get to do that. I hope all of us get to engage on that level. I really, if you do, I'm on your team. Really care about that. And it's very personal to me. I've had a lot of loss lately. And what the loss is about the person who feels it. That grief that I've experienced, my son committed suicide, one of my favorite aunts died, one of my best friends is dying if he hasn't died already, and I'm just like, I'm an emotional coward sometimes, and I've attempted to be there for him. He's 1,000 miles away, and he's out of his mind on some of the drugs that they have him on. The only thing I can do is tell him I love him and that he's my brother and that there's nothing I can do about what's happening to him if it hasn't already happened. And I hope somebody tells me when it does. So if you're listening to this, I would say get some professional help with grief, or attend a seminar, even if it's online or whatever. Learn about grief. Learn how to process our own grief. We have to learn how to process that. A lot of it is about the emotions behind it. And it's tough to rationalize the death of a person. It's tough to rationalize a dire health situation that is going to result in our own premature demise. It's tough to deal with all types of loss, losses of jobs, losses of financial stability, losses of family due to ill relations. It just goes on and on. Our whole lives are filled with loss. We are unable to escape it. So what we do is we take the existential route and face it head on. And one of the ways to do that is to face the inevitability of our own death.